Emergivec Sharia, South Africa's first and only Sharia-compliant family medical takaful and wellness product, wishes all listeners Ramadan Kareem. Download the Emergivec app today and get free immediate access to the Emergivec Sharia collection of du'as, hadith, Quran, and much, much more. With that being said, welcome back to Salam Media. The time is, 9:42, and we're going to be jumping into a very, very, I think, interesting topic, particularly for the continent of Africa. It has been 3 decades since the April 1994 Rwandan genocide, when members of the majority Hutu ethnic group killed an estimated 800,000 minority Tutsis, moderate Hutus, and members of a third ethnic group, the Twa, in one of the darkest episodes in world history. We'll be chatting a bit about how Rwanda emerged from that genocide to become one of Africa's success stories. And joining us for this conversation is Rwandan-based journalist Edmund Kagire. Edmund is coming to us live from the capital of Rwanda in Kigali. Edmund, thank you so much for joining us here on Salam Media, and welcome.
Thank you, Stella, for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, let's jump right into it. From my first, monologue intro was, it's been 30 years since the genocide in Rwanda happened. 30 years later, how do those events influence the psyche of the people of Rwanda, how you guys carry yourselves, the decisions that are made in government, and just the general thought processes of the country that is Rwanda?
Thank you, Stella. To start with, maybe if I could correct you a bit in your intro. You mentioned something to do with the numbers, 800, and also you mentioned moderate Hutus. I think this is also something that has really come up in the discussions 30 years later. People are asking themselves, is it difficult really to describe what really happened in Rwanda? Who are the targeted people? Who are the victims of the genocide? And as far as we know, it is the Tutsi. So there's no such a thing as moderate Hutu. But of course, as the UN says, there could have been a few Hutus who were killed at the time, either because they opposed the genocide or they didn't want to participate, or in one way or another they were aligned to Tutsis. But specifically, the genocide targeted the Tutsi. The number is also an issue. Some will say it's above, it's 800, but the government of Rwanda says it's 1 million and above. But that aside, as you mentioned, really, 30 years really is a milestone. It's this is an unusual kind of commemoration because 30 years is a long time. It's 3 decades, and here we are still talking about things to do with denial. Things to do with misrepresenting facts. As you have seen on the internet, there's a lot of debates going on. But for Rwandans specifically, it's a very special occasion. 30 years is quite a long time. It means people who were born in 1994 today are 30 years old. So it's quite for many Rwandans, it's a time to reflect and look back and see where we have come from and where we are today. As you might have seen, the occasion was big. It was attended by global leaders and representatives of international organizations. So it's quite an eventful week. Of course, it's somber as usual. This week normally is very somber here in Rwanda. People go back to remembering their own who were killed. It's a bit quiet down here. Not so many movements apart from people going to commemorate their own. We have a number of activities scattered around the country, people visiting memorials. So it's quite somber, but again, it's a kind of commemoration this time we feel comes with a little bit of hope. 30 years means that people are now adults, people are stronger, people are able to face whatever challenges that can come their way. So it's for some we are mourning, yes, but for many it is yet another time to look at how far we've come and where we are today, and also reflect on the future where we're headed.
Mm, mm. I'm listening to you, and as you speak, the 30 years that Rwanda is reflecting on is, in a lot of ways, I won't say the same, but similar to the 30 years here in South Africa, where we're also commemorating the fact that it's been 3 decades since we got our democracy, and the thing that we are most struggling with here in South Africa, and I want to know if it's also the case in Rwanda, um, is the fact that there doesn't seem to be a national discourse that was opened. Obviously, people will claim that there was the TRC and whatnot in South Africa's case. But
Mm.
what we're struggling with here is um, a national discourse, a national conversation that everyone that was affected, by the tragedy that happened, was involved in it, and not just the elite or people speaking on other people's behalf, but the normal men and women on the ground who were victims of the tragedy that happened were involved in the discourse. They told their stories. The conversation came to a close. There were reparations where they were needed, and ultimately the process of healing could begin. I think that's what we're struggling with here in South Africa, and that kind of mushrooms into little spikes of the past creeping into what we consider a future, where you'll have incidences of racism, or people saying certain things about other groups because that national discourse, that conversation was never had. Is it similar with Rwanda, or you guys have gone through the process of national healing and everyone understands what happened and where we're going as a country?
Yeah, I think both countries have their own unique experiences, and I'm not. Of course, they are the same. It requires people to come together and reconcile and put the past behind them. But I think what Rwandans have done is quite unique. The most important thing today is that people have reconciled. We are seeing killers living alongside their victims. We are seeing people bringing their stories to social media. Yesterday I was reading a story of some gentleman who took an initiative to forgive the people who murdered his family. They served their time and completed the sentences. But these people came out and he tried to approach them and try to talk to them and reconcile, put the past behind. But actually, it turns out they are the ones who still have some sort of guilt and they don't want to associate with the survivors. But for Rwanda, it has been a very unique case. As you might have heard, there was a traditional court known as the Chacha,
Hmm.
which tried all the cases. So they made sure everybody who participated had their time in court to respond. There were witnesses who saw the events happen. So for Rwanda, there has not been a debate of what happened and who needs what. And I don't think Tutsis have been asking for reparations over what happened. But one thing I think we see here most is that the people who really want this kind of discourse are the same people who really want to negate what happened. They are saying, oh, but they killed Tutsis, and you see, we also lost some people because there was a war going on, so we also need to talk about this and all that. And it ends up, people suggesting that there was some sort of double genocide that happened here in Rwanda, which is untrue because everybody knows the genocide. It started way back, as President Kagame said the other day. It started back in the 1950s and 1960s when the colonialists handed over power to Rwandans and they instigated Hutus against Tutsis. And the 1994 was just the climax of something that had been going on for a long time. And normally in 30 years, they say if a genocide has not happened, it might not occur. So there's a time space of about 30 years for things to boil up and become something else, But as we see in Rwanda, 30 years, you see people are stronger, people are united. And of course, people will say, the government forces them to reconcile. The government is tough on people, commands them to do this and that. But I don't think that's what it is. Rwandans have really understood where they have come from. They know what happened. They know who did it and who did what, and they have decided really to move on because, as you might see, a lot in the media. There's a lot of criticism that comes towards Rwanda over what it has done over the past 30 years. But when you look on the ground, for people on the ground, we see that we are now a resilient nation of people who cannot be taken aback or even go back into discussing, debating what happened and who did what. I think we have now transcended that point, and we are now looking at building a nation. It had never happened before. Before colonialism, Rwandans were one. The tribes, the ethnic tribes, never meant anything. But today, we have seen the impact of all this and what it led to. And really, I don't know, I could be sounding a little bit too optimistic, but really, when you ask people around, when you talk to your friends and your families and relatives, you realize we are people that have really moved on from this and really want to focus on a better future where we are not divided by our ethnic differences and all that. So we don't have such a discourse going on, who needs what. You realize people really have one focus, which is building one country and one people.
And I think that's what a very very interesting thing to see, especially when you're looking in from the outside. I can tell you for sure, us here in South Africa, when we look at Rwanda, essentially in a lot of ways, you are what we wish we can be. Rwanda now is like one of the shining stars of the continent of Africa, although there are internal issues. But holistically looking at it from the outside, Rwanda looks like it is the future of Africa. And I want to touch on specifically that. What do you think was that defining moment, when Rwandans decided that we're not gonna, hold back at the past. That past is where it needs to be. We are going to remember it. We are going to commemorate those that lost their lives because of the tragedy that happened. But there's something bigger that we need to focus on. Rwanda needs to be one of the, economic, social, tourist hubs of the continent. You guys have the potential, and right now you're acting on it. Well, I think this is, as a South African, it's a teaching moment, for us to take, a page out of you guys' script, because we went through such a huge tragedy, and it's been almost the the same amount of years. And us here in South Africa, we are, to be honest, everyone would agree with me, are struggling, to kind of not move on, but realize that there's a bigger goal, which is trying to move the country forward. But right now, every South African will agree with me that we are regressing, and it's largely because we have not faced the realities of the past head on. So, what was that defining moment for the people of Rwanda that went, we're going to move on from this? Whatever tribe or ethnic group you come from, you are Rwandan first before you are that. Because here in South Africa, we're struggling with that. People still associate themselves as, I'm black, I'm white, I'm Indian, or I'm mixed race before I'm South African. And naturally, they gravitate towards sometimes the selfish desires of their groups rather than the greater good of the whole nation.
I think for us, the defining moment was the fact that we had seen it all. The amount of bloodshed that really happened in Rwanda is. I'm not trying to undermine what happened in South Africa, but I don't think we got to a point where you lost 1 million souls in about 100 days. So I think that we saw it all, we went through it all, and it got to a point where people said that was enough, and now we need to focus on rebuilding and getting better and working together as a country. I'm not saying really we are where we want to be. I think what you realize with Rwandans, there's some level of cautious optimism. We are very optimistic, but we know we are not where we want to be. We still have issues we are grappling with. We have poverty, we have some other things, we have to improve healthcare and education and all these things. And I think one of the most important factors was President Kagame. He was really a rallying factor. He has been really behind this message of telling people, forget about this, let's move on, let's build a country where we can thrive. And of course, we still have our economic, issues that happen, of course, inflation here and there. But what you realize is that people are really optimistic. People really want to fight on, and people want to really build something together. And certainly the challenges always come. You see the criticism, the reports, everything that really comes Rwanda's way is would really disintegrate the country if people are not
Mm,
together. But certainly you realize a population that has decided no, that was enough. Now let's focus on other things. Of course, people will say it's a volcano, something bubbling under. They always say something is going to happen to Rwanda, but it
mm.
hasn't in the past. And I think we get stronger as we go on. The more these things come our way, the more people realize, no, we have to be together. We have to build something together. And certainly, people put days to this, but I don't think it will happen because when you talk to people, you realize we had enough. Now we want better.
Mm. Yeah, no, a very, very interesting conversation there, Edmund. Thank you so much for giving us your time and just giving us insight on, the psyche and the thoughts and, the emotions and the feelings of the people of Rwanda 30 years, after that horrific genocide. I'm sure me and you are going to be chatting soon and
I
hope
thought
to
we'll
hear from
discuss relations between Rwanda and South Africa because, as you know, President Ramaphosa was here the other day. So why are
I
you
didn't
avoiding that? But we good,
I
we good.
I didn't want to touch on that because I don't want it to take away, from a very
The
auspicious,
importance.
commemorative time that you guys are going through. Politics of the day are always going to be there. But the history and what defines a people, it's something that needs more focusing. 2 presidents later, relations between Rwanda and South Africa might be so cordial that we forgot, what's happening between the ten of
Very good, very
Ramaphosa.
good. You joined us. We appreciate. We appreciate.
Yeah,
As President
yeah.
Kagame said, we appreciate those who join us. Yeah, and those who don't want to join us, yeah, okay, move on.
Nah, I can tell you for sure before I let you go that two normal South Africans on the ground, we see Rwanda as a very close friend. There are a lot of Rwandans that have come, this side in South Africa, and they're living comfortably. We're happy. We love the cultural interchanges. It's a friend. Rwanda is truly seen as a friend in this part of the
Thank you.
continent. You're right. And
We appreciate. The next interview
definitely.
should be in Rwanda.
I'm
You have to
definitely
say.
gonna be making my way to Rwanda soon, and hopefully we'll catch up, you and I.
Thank you. I appreciate.
Thank you so much, Edmund. This
Thank you.
Edmund Kagire. They're coming to us live from Kigali, just giving us insight on the thought processes and the feelings and the psyche of the people of Rwanda 30 years into that tragedy that claimed almost or more than a million lives, according to Edmund. They're the people that have experienced the realities of that genocide. I think a very, very interesting conversation and a conversation that us South Africans need to start having. We'll never stop learning. I think that's one thing about South Africans. We can sometimes be so self absorbed that we think, we can't learn anywhere in Africa. And I think Rwanda is that perfect example of 30 years on, they're dealing with their issues head on. They're dealing with the past head on. And I think it's time for us South Africans to take a page out of Rwanda's book from their script and learn that you can move on from atrocities. There can be one national identity, even within diversity, that, you are South African first before you are anything else. And, that should be the focal point, moving South Africa, to new heights instead of being stagnant and stuck and everyone looking into their own selfish needs. That's that. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it's fired up with Ashraf Gangrika. You don't want to miss this one.